and welcome. I think I've got this off mute. Yep, it's off mute. Well, hello, another live stream. Don't the months fly past? I can't believe it's June. And I also can't believe that after all that gloriously sunny weather in the UK, it was this week that I decided was the time to spray paint my Trailblazer, and I've been dodging showers all week trying to get it painted. So welcome to everybody in chat. Hi to the people I've already said hi to, and Tim, and Burlington John, and Tamsin, and Timber, who have also snuck in. So thanks to Norm, Timber and Digger if he turns up for being my moderators. It does seem a lot quieter than when I first started, but they still turn up every single time, so thank you. And Jaw21 just snuck into chat, so welcome too. So there's so much to talk about this week. I have everything from props, props, when I dropped on the floor. Another prop. Yeah, you might be wondering what they are. I will explain. I've got some things to talk about. That's a clone. And a Kickstarter going live. Woo! How could I forget? So the Kickstarter is pinned as a message at the top of the screen. And wow, it's Tuesday. I was actually ready last Tuesday, but I left it an extra week to get some more marketing done. I've got someone helping with the marketing this time, and I still don't feel it's particularly well. And I'm looking at a couple of other Kickstarters that are generally doing less than I'd expect from the people who they are. So, if you can possibly go and click it and check it out and preferably buy it as well at some point when it comes out on Tuesday, then that would be a big help because I think it's quite slow at the moment in the marketplace. It's also a busy marketplace, and much as I've enjoyed doing this one, I never quite seem to know what to make to nail it. So anyway, the training gowns. I guess I'm at that nervous pre-launch phase where you've done everything you can. I've got the instructions left to right. And that's about it, really. I've got some stretch goals to finish, which are beyond where I expect to get to. So I haven't rushed to do them. Everything's done. Just bar the waiting, really. So go check it out, please. And welcome to Secret Anorak. And, welcome to Secret Anorak. And then Timber says, we annihilated the bots and scared them off. You did, Timber. There have been no bots since you guys got on. Very exciting. So what have I got to talk about? There's so much. This time on the live stream, we're going to be talking about designing like a pro. I find it quite odd. I'm actually a professional designer now. I was an accountant for 25 years. So you don't have to go to art college. You don't have to do art or graphics or anything. And I would say I actually suck at photography and graphics generally. It's just not my forte, but I love 3D design. And I've always thought in 3D. I've did trig in 3D. I've never had any problems with it. So for me, 3D design is much easier than like picking a good photo and getting a sharp, interesting angle. Just don't think enough about those. So, Tamsin says, is anyone else seeing flickering? This is really interesting. I actually think it's this light. So let me try a different light. I don't know if this is going to work. Has that got rid of the flickering? It's now a hideous light. Whoa! Yeah, I need to sort that like that. Woo! Ooh, that isn't good. Let me try a different. I haven't really got any other lights. So it's my main light in my room. It's got LED bulbs in it, and I think one of them is going, or something has happened to the ones that I put in. Because I've noticed that it's got really, really flickery. On the RPG night that I ran on a Monday, and they mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, and I swapped out a couple of the bulbs then. So I might just turn this down a bit more. Move, wrong way. I feel a bit blinded there. How does that look? Not so blinded. Yeah, so I think that's something, it's just, it's something we noticed, didn't we? I can see Tim and John on here. It's something we noticed quite recently, maybe in the last couple of weeks, and I did swap some bulbs out. So I don't know if the new bulbs are flickering or if the old ones are flickering, but anyway, there we go. We'll see. Right, so what else have we... Yeah, everyone's saying the flickering is now gone. That's good. I just feel a bit like, I don't know, washed out a bit. Anyway, here we go. Whew, that derailed me off what I was actually in the middle of. So there's 3 or 4 things I want to talk about this week. It's been a busy sort of time. As I start getting near one Kickstarter starting, I start thinking about the next Kickstarter. Because to me, the design bit's fun. So I want to talk a lot about 3D design because that's the bit I enjoy. But I also want to talk about something that's really struggling with at the moment, and that is scale. So I'm going to kick off with that. Then I'm going to do a little trailer for the training grounds. In fact, let's do the trailer for the training grounds first. It's movie 2. So this is my pitch video. I've turned the video off so it doesn't actually have any sound, I hope, that you're getting. And it's a very modular 3-inch cube, which is interesting because it's hard to do exciting looking buildings at first sight because everything's a 3-inch cube. But then you realise just how much that simplicity actually releases you into doing all the accessory bits. So I've actually got 5 flavour packs off this fairly simple 3-inch cube system. There's the Galaxy pack, the Mech pack. So this is Galaxy pack, Mech pack, Junk pack, Black Site pack and Cyber pack. And they're all really different and they really change a 3-inch cube. Every single thing in it, and actually the cube itself comes in plain, concrete or damaged, and the damage is like shell damaged. And I've done it on 3-inch cubes, so there's a 1x1, a 1x2 and a 2x2. And the first stretch goal, which hopefully will release, is the 1x3, the 2x3 and the 3x3, which are just too big for the average anything. So it's a very much based on there's blocks, so you can just put it together with gravity, or you can clip it if you actually want to clip it. And what I personally would do is probably make each building up and clip those and then put them together with gravity, sort of each individual building stacking on another. I went out of my way so that if you want to print it with multicolour, so this is brown and the concrete, and do 2 colours for printing so you don't want to paint, you can do that. All the items that need to be in 2 colours, like the doors and the surrounds, they're actually all split. So it does make it a bit easier for painting. And you can see here, this is actually the first pack I designed, the Mech pack, and it's got way too many parapets. There's like 50 different parapets, I think. The Junk pack was one of the last ones I did, and it's aimed at a different market. And one of the things this pitch video was hoping to do was hit 4 or 5 different games. So you don't need to buy multiple scenery. You can just buy this one set and then print out different sections, paint them differently, put them together, and actually match different games with the same set of scenery. It's up to you whether you were to print them and put them together, or whether you were to keep them separate and swap out bits every time you play. There's extra height if you want to play Shatterpoint. So this one actually has a lot of Shatterpoint extenders on it, so it's taller. There's space above the door, in other words. Whereas a lot of them, there's no space above the door, and that's just a 3-inch cube. There's 3 pledges, basically, all in pledge, which is all 5 packs, or the 1, 2 or 3 pack pledges, which is your choice pack pledges, and you may only want the Mech pack or something. Collector's pledge if you've not supported my work before and you want everything, and then the merchant's pledge, which allows you to do physical prints but not sell them. There is a free gift, and if you're already a newsletter subscriber, then you will have got it. Otherwise, go and join my newsletter. It's on the website, easy to find, it's off the front page, and sign up. And I've also been doing grid forged tiles. Now these are all 3-inch grid forged tiles. Mud, ground, tarmac and landing zones are the main ones. And this is coming out Tuesday in the afternoon UK time. So if you haven't signed up already, I'm really excited to get it out there. But I'm also at the sort of, as I said earlier, the dready bit of, wow, is it going to do well or not? I could do with getting my Kickstarters to earn just a little bit more money. I haven't really earned enough recently, if at all, since I went into content creation. So that's like 5 years of not really earning enough. And it's fine until you want to replace something big like a car or a fridge. Like my fridge only goes down to 11 degrees at the moment, which is really sad. Thankfully, I generally cook at mum's house, so I don't have much in there. I go around and cook mum's supper and myself supper at the same time. So I really, and I don't use milk. So the fact my fridge doesn't get cold doesn't bother me that much, but it's a bit of a worry. So Tim's now saying the flickering is still there, but he's round other people saying the flickering's gone. I don't see the flickering on my screen anymore, and I was seeing it before. So there. Stating the obvious. Welcome, glad you've got your cheese. So Jaw21 says it's the hertz of the electric and the FPS of the camera. Well, the FPS of the camera is actually, I've moved from using my iPhone camera to using the FaceTime one. It's just slightly more robust. If you remember, I was always having to reset my iPhone camera all the time on OBS, whereas this one is integral. So I've just gone to using that. So there we go. And then, so there's no flickering now. That's cool. Right, that's good. I just need to, I presume it'll sort itself over time as one of the bulbs goes. And whatever, it is the LED bulbs, because they didn't used to do this when I first had this camera. It came in the last couple of weeks, which is about the time I got the new Mac, so maybe not. So that was one thing I need to talk about. Obviously, plugging my Kickstarter is probably the most important thing that I will do in this live stream for me. But it's not the most exciting thing if you've already backed it. So I want to talk a bit about designing generally, and a specific problem that I've got at the moment, and a solution that I've also come up with. So first up, the stuff I was waving around earlier, this and this, these, let me show you how exciting these are. These are LED channels. I talked a bit last time, in fact I think waffling is probably the word. I waffled a bit last time about, I just keep popping this one out. Hang on. Yeah, I dropped it on the floor and popped it out, but, right, okay. So, if you look, you can see it's a polycarbonate top. It's easy to see on this one because it's a white polycarbonate top and an aluminium channel. And the other one was a black polycarbonate top and a black channel. And I talked last time about I hadn't done the ceilings on Scut City, which is my massive sci-fi display diorama that I want to be talking about on the live stream, but I've kind of hit this roadblock of it's modular, but it being modular, there's I need to have a modular outside to hide all the back of it, to create the diorama back effectively, and a ceiling to put the lights in. And I've been struggling to get the ceiling done. I really have. It just hasn't worked. So what I've done now is I've come up with a design that this is going to be how I'm hoping the aluminium's, it's fairly unflexible. It will just slide in from the front with the cable, and I'll be able to use that to do my LEDs, and it will be self-supporting at the front and the back. Rather than side to side where the U gets in the way, it will also visually, I want it to run front to back. And I've got the idea that the ceiling is going to sit into grooves in the ceiling, and in between it there will eventually be ceiling, but I don't know what that's going to be yet. And I've got clip holes in there, the ability to put clips in there and have a sort of rim that slides in. I don't know whether how it's all going to work, whether it will clip in one direction or two directions. I am going to do one shelf in its entirety on my kitchen workbench, kitchen worktop, which I really need to get back. So I need to get this fixed because it's been sitting there all year. It was there before Christmas, practically, this work test of this thing. And once it's apart, I will then have to disassemble it, put in the outside, put in the grid forge base, put in the ceiling and get it to work. And I need to make sure everything works modularly, that I can take it out and put it in when it's in situ, because there's very little when you've got two shelves sort of room to get in and do things. So it's stuck at that point. Let's just say that it's stuck at that point, and I need to get on and get it fixed. And I'm hoping that once I've got this LED channel in, and I've worked out how that's actually going to go on, it will sort of slide through from the front somehow, that I will be able to get on and just get this nailed then in place, because obviously the ceiling has to go on before I can slide it in, because it comes down from above as it clips. So I've been thinking a lot about it, as you can tell, and I don't think I'm 100% there. I was hoping that this may actually have, and it hasn't, it's going to fall over again, this may actually have a bigger slot. You see there's like a hole. I was hoping I might get one with a bigger than the millimetre or 0.8 that it actually is. But I will do something that slots onto that somehow, and it's held up by it. There should be maybe a millimetre above it, but and it's going to slot in and hang down. And the ceilings are going to have, loads of pipe work. At the moment, the shelf above is painted black, so I just need to have some way of a sort of holding the edges of the pipe work. I've got one of these going in every 3 inches. I'm not going to put an LED channel in every 3 inches, but I've got a gap to put one in every 3 inches, because for some of them I might have them 6 inches apart. Higher up it's going to be lighter, and as you go lower down it's going to go to the black carbonate. Lower down it's going to be darker. It's going to be cheaper LED strips with fewer LEDs in them, so it looks more spaced out. Eventually these may get covered with a sort of 3D print cover over them of some sort. I don't know, we'll see. I'd like maybe the lower levels to have 1 or 2 that are going on and off LEDs, so blinking on and off. So I'd like to be able to get these in and out to do lighting effects. But the top spaceport, that's one of the first levels I can do, because I have all my spaceport stuff, I want to be bright and shiny. So the aluminium ones are about a third of the price, 2/3 of the price of the black ones. So I've got a lot more of the aluminium ones. So the top spaceport is going to be more shiny silver, and it gets grungier and grungier as you go further down. That's the idea. So that was a decision, this week, and they arrived on Friday, and or Saturday, and I looked at them yesterday anyway. So I think they arrived late Friday. I looked at them yesterday and thought, yep, that's really good, and then did nothing with them today. So I need to get on. The ceiling's printing. I say I did nothing, and the supports are printing, and I'm going to test it. So that's where I am, to see whether it will slide in easily, and then whether I can get backdrops in. I want to just put black card in for the backdrops at the moment, or grey card, just so there's something blocking out the fact that it's a bookshelf behind and there's wall, but something it's a pull up and slot down, so you pull it above and then pull it out forwards. So it's got to be a certain size. So those cards will be easy to get out, hopefully. And then once they're up and out, I'll be able to reach around the back to do things. That's the idea. So that's where I am on that. That was quite exciting for me. It has been sitting around for a lot of time, and my mind has been on the Kickstarter, and now the Kickstarter's sort of ready to go. My mind's off the Kickstarter and onto other things, which I'll also be showing off. So anyway, Rocket Tim says weird time sync. Yeah, his stream was almost 90 seconds behind live. Mine's always 10 seconds. So if I was to look over here to this side, this is where my live me is. And then I look here and wait for it. Yeah, and there's me starting to point. So you can see there's quite a gap between the two bits. It's probably 10 seconds at least for me. So I never am up to date with chat. The other thing I've been doing is thinking about scale. So GridForge is this amazing system where you have a base. This is a 3x1 base, and you put on tiles. And this big one is a little bit loose, but the other ones are in. And these are hydroponics. So I printed them in white just for a bit of excitement. They are hydroponics. A tall one, a short one, and a medium sort of thing. And I also have, so I don't think I've printed the tile of it for some reason, a giant, here we go, a giant plant one, which is for hydroponics. And it's because my next Kickstarter, which I won't talk too much about, I don't want you to get too excited about it yet, we'll do that in the next stream, is going to have a lot of tiles. It's going to have a lot of GridForge tiles in it. And obviously it's going to be spacey. So I just wanted to always make a plant. So I tried making this plant, and I was really impressed how well, yeah, that actually focuses okay for just a computer webcam. I was hoping that's quite small. It's really fine, and it printed all right at 0.08. I will try it at 0.16, 0.12 and 0.08 and put the pictures up so that people can see what it looks like. The point of this is, you can see that this is actually the top of the tile here. So I'm just going to use one of these, which hasn't got a tile on it. And this is my clone. This is the scale I model in, 35mm. And you can see this is a factory size for a sort of massive space station type effort. That's a factory size hydroponics unit. And my clone is this big. You know, the pot is quite tall. The pot's quite tall. You know, if he wanted to water that, it's not a small pot. If you were to put it like that, you realise it's knee height, but actually he's probably going to be about there. Yeah, okay. But the trouble is, 35mm, which is my clone, 1:48, it's my favourite scale. I really have always liked it as a scale. I like O scale, which is the equivalent in American O. I really have always liked this scale. It's a good scale for seeing people, and it's a good scale for getting stuff in, especially when you're doing things like this. Trouble is, most games, and I'm a tabletop game market, most games are this scale. And this scale, this is 28mm, so let's compare them. This is my clone. Okay. This is another dude. And you can see he comes up to the shoulder, that's his head there. He comes up to about a clone shoulder. This is a different game, and he comes up to like less than a clone shoulder. And it's really bizarre. They're both 28mm, and I'm struggling. I'm really struggling. And I'm on top chat. Why am I on top chat? Let's go to live chat. Oh, okay. And I'm struggling to work out how to model this next Kickstarter. The current one, I got around scale. Oh, and I should have said the 28mm is about 1:58, 1:59, 1:60, depending who you are. So I tend to use 1:60, which isn't a railroad scale, but if you were going to pick the nearest one, it would be S scale at 1:64. So for those of you railroad people, it's like the difference between O and S. You can't really use the same people because they're different sizes, and doors are different sizes. So I'm struggling because I like modelling 35mm. All the figures I've designed, all the designing I do is at 35mm because I like 1:48. And now I'm struck with, I have to market to the 28mm games. And Tamsin might, you play a lot of games. You'll understand this. I'm trying to work out how to get my 35mm and my 28mm to play together. And I really can't. Hi Digger, good to have you there. So Rocket City Tim says, I always scale 28mm to 116% to split the difference between 28 and 35. It's interesting. Norm says, hi Digger, those naps are great, right? Yeah. So the biggest problem is when you get to doors. Now I got around it in my current Kickstarter by having 2 sets of doors. I had the mech doors, which were the full 3-inch less the roof, effectively height. And I had some small doors, which were more people size height. A clone can get through them at 35mm, but he may not get his gun he's carrying above his head through. A 28mm figure will go straight through. It's fine until you realise that one of the things I want to do in the future also includes playable spaceships. That'll be a later in the year one. And playable spaceships need to have a set scale. And to me, that would be 35mm. But Gridforge, this system with all these bases, these are inch bases, these are made for 28mm. Now I could do, theoretically, some things like corridor sides. You know, a corridor size it's the same, isn't it? You know, the side of a corridor. But doors suddenly look weird. A door looks massive with the 28mm character. And John Games from Second Dynasty gave me the standard set of open lock, and they're 2 inches high. Now, to be honest, I wouldn't even get this dude through a 2-inch high. Let me show you. So these are my inches. That's 2 inches high. Actually, he would get through a 2-inch high. But the 2 inches high, less all the Gridforge stuff. So actually, the 2-inch starts down there. So I lose about that much. Would he get through? Yeah, he's going to just be hitting the top. But you could just about, and that's the wall, and then you'd have space out for the door ahead. So I'm spending this last few days really going round and round and round on how to reconcile 28 and 35mm. So let's see. Tamden says you can't mix 28mm and 35mm. You can't really mix 28mm and 32mm. Yeah, I think you can actually mix 32 and 35 a little bit better. That's 3mm versus 4mm. It's just I've got some 32mm and they're not that dissimilar. Rocket City's Tim says Gridforge scales well. That's an interesting thing, because what do you mean Gridforge scales well? So if I model at 35mm and you guys want to scale it down, it comes off the inch grid if you want to then make it 28mm. It just comes off the inch grid because suddenly you've scaled it down 125%. Will your Gridforge still work? And if, like me, you've already printed a ton of standard size Gridforge, do you want to make it smaller? So Tamsin, the worst I've come across was the figures for Warlord Games Strontium Dog Game. The 3 waves of figures got progressively larger for some reason. It makes me laugh because these are both 28mm. And if I put them side by side, I don't know if I can get that up there. If I put it in front of me, this dude is shorter than the other dude. This dude here. He's also tubbier. I think one's Infinity, the white metal is Infinity, and the other one's Stargrave. And it's definitely, they're both 28, but they're just different sizes themselves. So Tamsinol says they were much more consistent for their other 2000 AD games. Yeah, I can imagine that constantly changing makes it quite hard. Rocket City, for the other way, is 83% for 35mm to 20. I tend to just work it on 80%, to be honest. It's because I do it off the actual scales, 60 to 48. So 1 to 60 to 1 to 48. Timber says, I guess it's similar to the problem of HO and double O. Nail on the head there, Timber, it really is. You can use both, but need to keep the wrong scale figures away from doors and windows. And this is my problem, because Scut City is at 35mm. And all the figures I design are at 35mm, because I started off playing tabletop games in a 35mm game. So I have loads of time and thought invested in 35mm, and I don't know what to do. I don't know whether to design the next one, which is going to have loads of floors and corridors like a space station. I don't know whether to design it all at 35mm. I don't really want to design at 28. I've got a few 28mm figures now, just so I can play with them. I've got 3 or 4 packs of game figures to play with. But I don't want to design, but 28mm is where the majority of the market is. A lot of stuff is agnostic, but there's no point creating something that isn't going to sell to 80% of the market. And it will matter because I'm going to be doing things like, when I do the playable spaceships, which aren't the next one, I'm going to have to worry about cockpits. And I wonder whether you might end up saying it's 35mm, shrink, and just everything goes off the grid 4" for 28mm. Yeah. So Rock City Tim says, I'm lucky that my players get their models from me so I can drive the complete experience and settled on 32mm. Oh, that's interesting. That's like not a scale that I particularly even think about. It's like halfway between the two, 28 and 35. Tamsin says, were those 28mm figure packs your UKG purchases? They were indeed. Actually, I got the Stargrave ones off eBay, but the Infinity pack, I got a couple of Infinity ones actually. I didn't realise they were white metal. I really like the look of them. But obviously before I painted them or even primed them, I would need to do some work. So I got those are the Nomads, but I've also got their Operation Sand Trap from Infinity. And I've got some Dead Zone, which I bought ages ago. And I've also got 32mm Halo Flashpoint knocking around, which I didn't buy at UKGE, but I had it pre-ordered and it was there. I took some photos of it. So it's difficult because I think people end up with more and more different figure sizes. So, Doug, hi. Doug, you just missed my entire waffle for about 20 minutes. So struggling about deciding what scale to do, 35mm or 28mm, and how to reconcile them all when designing my next thing. But not to worry, you'll be there tomorrow night, and I'm sure that it'll come up. Rocket City Tim, I play the second Dynasty 28mm ships, but I scale them up when I print. I'm lucky enough to have 4 FDM and 3 resin printers, so the new stuff doesn't cause time crunches. Yeah, so I scale up their stuff to 35mm. I do it at 125%. My problem is, and scaling up is easier, I'm modelling this rather fine thing. That's probably at the limit of FDM printing already. And if I was to scale that down 80%, I'm not sure whether it would print. So yeah. It's like, will it print at 80%? And this is the problem. If I set all my tolerances quite fine at 35mm, because I like fine tolerances, they don't scale down 80%, and it's quite noticeably large. Now I could do the majority of stuff, but actually a lot of what I'm planning to do is all human habitation stuff. So yeah, Doug, I don't know, we've discussed mixing them and whether you can get away with mixing them, or whether we've just discussed the fact you do 28mm and I do 35. So we'll have a chat. It could be a space station designed for a larger species. That is true, which is what Doug's suggesting. Rocket City, the slicer may not keep it, but you could do scaling in Blender and that fine stuff will be maintained. Yes, but I'm doing this to sell, so people don't. Yeah, so that would require me then to do 2 sets, a 35mm and a 28mm. And that's probably where I'm going. Do I need to do 2 sets, 35mm and 28mm? Because if I scale it, everything scales off the inch. So I can scale a chair quite easily in Blender down and put it on a tile and go, woohoo, here's a 28mm set for you. It's doubling my work, but not really, because the bulk of the work's in creativity. So the question I get for you guys, before I lose any more viewers out of boredom over this, is would you buy something if you had the choice of printing in 28 or 35? Would that make a difference? Or if it was 35mm, would you just not buy it because it's 35mm? So Rocket City Tim says, I meant anyone could take the SDLs, not specifically you. Tim, they won't. People just want to print. They don't want to have to rescale it. People just the thought of taking it somewhere other than a slicer scares people. And I need to make this really accessible and easy for people just to pick and print. So if I wanted people to be able to shrink it, I would make sure that it was shrinkable myself. And I just print a 28mm set and a 35mm set. Because one of the other problems is when you start shrinking things down, clip holes change, things like that change. So what I'd actually want to do is keep, say if I was doing a spaceship and I'm doing the interior, I want the standard grid forged tile base in it. And if people want 28mm, the flooring can be the same. Actually, the walls can be the same. I may just be a little bit tall on the levels, but then I could shrink the human habitation stuff down. And, if I go up my door handles at this height and there it is actually. And it's so hard to point on screen. There. Which way did I do to do that? Anyway, you could see it. That was my light switch I was trying to point at. Is at that height. And so the light switch is obviously at a different height, and yet you use both of them when you come into a room, a door handle and a light switch. So obviously control panels in the future could be up high to let you through a room, or they could be down low. So if I pick them to be fairly low for 35mm, they'd be at the right height for 28mm. Yeah, anyway, moving on to the other thing, I was thinking, I want to do quite a few exciting things. So I've been printing out design things, just playing. But the one thing I want to talk about today was actually 3D print design. So before we get too far in, I've actually got a movie set up, but I've also got a slideshow. And I'm probably just going to go with the slideshow because I think it's easier. So let me just pause this slideshow. To the beginning. Oh wow, look at that, it goes through. So this is the slideshow that I kind of put together for this, but I did it in squares for some reason, so I'm sorry it doesn't actually fill the whole screen. It's based on a video I did. It was a 7-minute video. It's really useful as a 7-minute video, but I didn't feel like I could go into much detail. So I wanted to spend the rest of time, I've talked about the training grounds, I've talked about my scale issues, and I'd love to know people's views on the scale issues, on whether you can design something that has just almost 28 and 35 in it, and then basically the talk about this. So this is what we're going to be doing. So before I launch into that, I'm just going to read Rocket City Tim's last chat, which was on the last subject. In addition to the grid forge system, have you considered the dungeon block system? They scale very easily. I mean, everything scales up and down. It isn't my worry with scaling up and down. Trouble is, as soon as you scale them up and down, they're not on the inch grid system anymore. And once you come off the inch grid system, because going from 28 to 35 takes you off the inch grid, once you're off that inch grid, you're off it. And so therefore you can't use the grid forge templates as they come. You have to adapt them. So when I did my Transport Delta, I had big clips, I had everything. And the big clips are chunkier, but suddenly everything is now a different size. You have to remember to scale everything up. And I did miss a few things and print some quite big pieces at 100%, not 125%. And it becomes messy because everything becomes chunkier because you've scaled it up. But I still want to be able to use the inch grid forge system for 28mm, which is what most people want it for. So if I tell people you've got to scale down 80% to be in 28mm, they've already got Grid Forge at 28mm, and it's not at 80%, it's at 100%. And they've already got the Grid Forge tiles because they bought them from Second Dynasty, they've bought them from Games Art, you know, they've bought them from Blasted Semiflange. So they've got them already on the inch system. And so scaling only works if you only scale the top of the tile. So there we go. Right. 3D design. Let's talk about something that's very dear to my heart, and actually the bit I really like the most. It's my favourite part of my current job. Marketing? Nah. Yeah, hate it. Generally anything that's, you know, physical modelling, I do a lot less of it now. I tend to spend most of my time in Blender doing 3D design. So, time to talk about it. First up, I think this is the most important thing. You need to have real world inspiration. You can't just make up in a cloud of nothingness. If you were to look at, I follow quite a few people who design for things like Star Wars, Aliens, stuff like that. And they'll often go, oh, this helmet was, you know, inspired by tribal Africa, or this helmet was inspired by this, or this pilgrim was designed, you know, inspired by X, or I looked at this and thought of this, and then I went and did this design. There's a lot of design inspiration out there that people are getting from cultures within the current world. If you know, I was talking about Infinity, you know, they've got a lot of very culturally inspired by sort of our current world. So they've got the Hakizam faction, they've got a JSA, which is like a Japanese one, they've got Pan-Oceania, and a lot of their sci-fi is therefore themed around existing cultures. If we were to look at sci-fi that doesn't look quite like our cultures, then it's themed around films they've been inspired by. Blade Runner has a lot to blame for the way most dystopian future look. But if you're modelling something like mud, well, my terrain tiles recently were mud. Mud is the same whether the mud is on an alien planet, maybe a different colour, or on Earth. It's all just mud. And mud looks like mud wherever you are. If you go to Mimbam in Star Wars, which is in the Solo movie, and comics and stuff, if you go there, their mud, probably because it's filmed on this planet, looks exactly like our mud. Steel looks exactly like steel. Even if they call it Durasteel or Duracrete rather than concrete, it still looks exactly the same. And part of that is because even in the sci-fi world, when they're creating the movies, the cartoons, whatever it is, they're still using current inspiration from today. So if you want to do a crate, Google crate. If you want to do a cyberpunk crate, Google cyberpunk crate. It will give you inspiration and ideas of what crates may look like so that you then know what it is that you're trying to model. If you're doing it for a model railway, you might want it to look exactly like the real thing, because let's face it, especially in model railways, rivet counting is a real problem, and people will tell you, well, you'll find that crate has 5 rivets and you've only put 4 on. I'm not joking. People will probably comment on your crate's number of rivets. I once had a model marked down in a contest for the NMRA because it didn't have any rivets in it. And when I said to them, there's no rivets in the original, did you not look at the photos? They went, there were photos. So, you know, you can copy something exactly, but actually if people expect there to be rivets, they'll still comment there's no rivets. So very important, get out there and look at the real world. If you want to know how big a step is when you're modelling a flight of stairs, there are standards for stairs in, well, certainly if you Google, you'll find some standard stair heights and rises. I know there's 13 stairs in my house and they're quite steep. But if you were to look, you can see, you could go to a stair manufacturer and they'll tell you the heights of their stairs. You can go online and look at architects and see the height of their stairs. So you know exactly how big your stairs have to be so they look real. Just one of those things. Right, so having spent a lot of time going on about real world inspiration, I do think it is one of the most important things, and I can't really stress it enough. Even if you're doing sci-fi, grunge, texture, painting, when you're doing that, all follows real world grunge and texture. And you can do what you like. You can say, well, the dust is pink. The dust can be pink, but it's still going to settle where dust normally settles. It's still going to sit in the cracks and crevices. Metal that wears or rusts is still going to wear and rust just like it does on this earth. And once you've got your real world inspiration, the next thing is, and I'm really bad at this, block it out before you jump into the detail. If you don't block out, this is in a weird order. That is not the one I expected to get next. Anyway, we'll do it. If you don't block it out before you get into it, it's so easy to jump into the detail. If you put a bevel on this block now, and then you decide you want a bigger, smaller bevel later, you want to move this block around, it's far harder to move it around in the 3D design world with a bevel on it than without one. So you're better off beveling everything at the end. You're better off adding all the detail at the end when you've got your main block out done. It's really hard to change things once you get too far down a design. So spend quite a lot of time at the thing, working out your dimensions. What I did, for these crates, and this is my crates that I did for the latest Kickstarter. For the crates, it's important that you know that they're going to stack. They're 1.5 inches. They've got the same gravity blocks on top that is used in the buildings, so they will stack on the buildings if needed. Really, realistically, you just have to make sure everything like that works before you go to detailing. Ooh, let's see which one comes next. It's quite hard, this, anyway. All right, details. This is so out of order. Oh well. So details. Details make the difference. I probably can't stress enough that realistically, detailing is what people notice the most. They'll notice if something is the wrong size. They'll notice if the building is wrong. But when I've just done some 3-inch cube buildings, there's not much you can do with a 3-inch cube building. The size is already set. But they'll notice if the doors are wrong, or if the windows look wrong, or if, in this case, the crates, the rivets are wrong, or the detail looks too big. And that's actually one of the problems with FDM. I think details sometimes look too big. So if I was to look at these two plants, let's pick this. So that is the hydroponics plant. You see, fairly detailed. This is the same plant blown up into a large plant. It somehow looks less detailed. Some of the detail that's in there, like the ridges on the outside, suddenly become visible. But a lot of the time, those details are just the wrong size when you expand things up and down, which is another problem when we've been talking about scale. Oh, I see a few people have snuck in. So Monique, hello and welcome. Good to have you with us. Tim says, no, it's 6 rivets. Tim, there's always one. Tamlin says, but realistic stairs often aren't playable. Same thing with doors. That is very true. These are my playable stairs for 35mm. Whoops, turn them that way. So I'm just working on them. And if you were to try and get a pair of clones, onto a normal set of stairs, they just fall off. But this lot have a little dip in the middle. So actually, I do it like that. He can go into that little dip and then he can stay on it. And you can put them in. Most people will manage to get them in a little bit before they come out. It's easier if they're in the middle. If you've got someone with one on the edge or really tall scenery, it doesn't work. But most people who make games and actually want to play them will have, some kind of ability to do that. So that's my playable stairs, which I've designed. But that doesn't look anything like a pair of stairs, you know. It's probably got half as many steps as it should. And also this is just a test piece. It's just a blank to see if it works. Yeah. And the same thing with doors, actually. I've already mentioned this figure. This figure is very, very typical figure. His head is here. His gun is here. Look at the difference. You know, 99% of people going through a door would duck their gun. Your Mini is fixed. He's made of metal. He's not ducking his gun. So you can like tilt them through the door, but realistically doors need to be bigger. Just so that you can get the bases through. So I've got a standard height door for a 35mm and he doesn't go through the bottom. His base is too wide for a standard size door. And it was for the Nagagin tower, and I've actually got it half designed and then changed my mind about doing it. And it was done. I just went today to look at it for scale size, and he fits through it fine. It's aimed at 48, 1 to 48, but I can't get him through the door because his base is too wide. And I remembered halfway through doing the current Kickstarter that actually my mech doors had to be able to get a 40mm base through. So I had to make them slightly wider to get a 40mm base through. That's the trouble. You know, the bases are just so unrealistic. So there we go. Tamsin says sprout versus cabbage. Yes, it is. It very much is. I was actually thinking lettuce versus triffid almost, but Sherga says, realistically, you point your muzzle at the ground and not the second floor when walking with a gun. Realism, Sherga, yeah, but that just doesn't look good. I mean, at least the clone is pointing it in a direction which might shoot somebody. And the clones generally don't have them slung over their shoulder. It's just not a look you get. But there are some, like Infinity, that are all posing. The girl, who I didn't bring down, is actually running, and she's got a gun over her shoulder and a knife like this, and she's running with them, and she's tilted forward, them both, and you're like, that is a really weird pose. Norm retracted his message. I wasn't quick enough to see it. Shergirl, it's quicker to bring the muzzle up to target than down to a target as well. I didn't know that. I mean, I don't really shoot people. Doug says, you might, Shergirl, but you have learnt gun safety. That's true. Very true. So, yeah, right. So my biggest problem with doing details is getting the right size. I really struggle with sizing. It's like you might make a console and then realise that it's just really small or really big. My problem is generally I make things quite big and I often end up shrinking them 80-90% after I've designed them just to get them to a more reasonable size. So what I do is I've actually got some 3D print clone figures on bases that I import into my programs, and I put them standing in my program so that when I am trying to design it, I can see. So for these hydroponics, and those on my Discord will have seen them, and there's a link to the Discord in the chat description below. You know, when I am trying to decide it, I can put that 3D figure in. I often just print stuff, especially with these plants, because I was testing whether they would print or not. I often just print stuff to see whether it will work sizing wise. I think it's important to have it physically and look at it sometimes. It's all very well being a 3D print designer, and I love 3D printing, but there's a printing element to it too. You really just need to print sometimes. Shergirl, it's because you can see over the gun bringing it up. But you don't look as posy if it's not over your shoulder looking cool. Shergirl was turned into Shirt Girl by autocorrect. Shirt Girl. I'll have to call you that in future, Shergirl. I'm sorry. It's sheer gall, not Shirt Girl. It's true. Yeah. So I struggle a lot with sizing. So if you are struggling with sizing, I do recommend just bringing in some, you'll have an STL of a figure somewhere. You can get them online. Make sure it's the right scale for the scale you're modelling in. Put it on a base if you model with a base, and use it to check that anything can get through doors, that things look right. If you're modelling for railways where things are more important and you've spent a lot more time looking at the real world, because they have an actual size you're trying to copy, that's fine. But when you're doing a chair, you still want to check that your figure will sit in a chair. And tabletop figures are not normal. This guy, he is a clone, and they are incredibly fine-legged. I don't think a real person can fit into an animated clone, which is where they came from, outfit. But they're still chunked up a lot. They're a lot chunky boys compared to their real figures. If you were to look at a really spindly creature like a B1 battle droid, they're chunked up to print. Nobody can print them. No one can plastic injection mold them even sometimes at their CGI'd original. So it's important that the figures you're going to use will actually sit on the chair. So I actually have some seated clones. So when I'm designing chairs, I get the seated clone. It's a Dartfire design. I just bring in these Dartfire design clones, and I check that my Dartfire design clone will sit on the chair. And then I know it's the right size, not just for looking, but practically. If I wanted to put a seated figure on there, a seated figure would work. Sadly, you don't get many seated figures, but if you want clones, and probably stormtroopers, there's some Dartfire does have them. Right, Shergel says nothing more imposing than the gaping maw of the muzzle. Tamsin says autocorrect has a lot to answer for, Norm, much to answer for. Yes, autocorrect. Every time I type some certain things, it changes it. And you can see Rogue One, people have been typing that a lot recently with Andor being out. The amount of people who are typing Rouge One makes me think that that's actually autocorrect having its thing. It's like it doesn't like Ahsoka either, it's always Ashoka. It changes it to. Anyway, Monique says the design code for stairs won't work for mini bases. Nope, that's why we have playable stairs. But I still do realistic stairs as an option for decorative options. And actually what's interesting is an awful lot of games don't actually work with stairs. You're either at the top or you're at the bottom. You don't stop part way up them. So, in fact, most games don't. RPGs might, but most war games, you're either at the top or you're at the bottom. You don't really stop on the stairs. And as a result, as long as you have a representation of stairs there, then it's often enough. But my problem is I only want to get my stairs into 3 inches, and that's exactly 3 inches. It's really hard to get stairs into 3 inches. And I've done them before, playable stairs, and they're 6 inches, or they're really long to get the height, the depth in to get a 27mm deep base on. So that's a problem. Right, let's see which slide comes next. It's hard to tell. What's it going to be? I can finish my tea. Okay, I am definitely going to have to go back to the beginning and see. Okay, these are all out of order. So we're going to go here to, find 3D software that suits you. Should have started with this really. So Tamsin says Rouge rather than Rogue is just people being wrong. Same thing with Soldier rather than Soldier, Cavalry rather than Cavalry. Tell you what's funny, I read a lot of fan fiction, and I love fan fiction. I've been reading for about 18 months. There's a bottomless well, it appears, though. I think I've read some of them a couple of times now and not noticed. And there's things that people always get wrong. Always get wrong. And when someone gets it right, I'm like, hallelujah, this person understands English. One of them is tenets. People talk about the tenets of the Jedi Order a lot. And instead of saying tenets, which is Tenets, they say tenants. There's an awful lot of tenets of the Jedi Order going around there. when they actually want tenors. And the other one that I notice people almost always get wrong is they want to rein something in. And they always use a G in it, like a queen. She reins it in. But actually, it comes from a horse's rein. You rein in a horse. That's where that comes from. And it doesn't have the G. I noticed that one as well. So there we go. They're ones I saw today. So, Shergel, carrot, Shergel, tenants. I thought it was rules of acquisition. Haha, that's Star Trek, not Star Wars. People have to live somewhere. That's true. Tenements. Tenements. Don't forget nuclear instead of nuclear. I think that's just because that's how some countries pronounce it. Car carrot. Car carrot. Okay. The rules of acquisition was the other Star franchise, says Tamsin. Indeed. I do miss the Ferengi. They were so cool. Instead, we get the banking clan, which are pretty scary in Star Wars. Anyway, let's rewind the 3D debate to finding software that suits you. I really think like Blender. I tried Fusion 360 for a bit, and Fusion 360 generally wants a blueprint that you extrude off. And it doesn't do, it will do fluid shapes, but it doesn't do meshes. It does like extrusions and things. And you can extrude in Blender and you can cut in Blender, and I do all of that in Blender. But it's interesting, on Friday I was on the Second Dynasty live stream, and John does everything as actual mesh. If he wants to put a clip hole in, he just puts a mesh clip hole in and puts it into the shape somehow. Me, I want to put a clip hole in, I do a boolean and I just cut it. And a boolean is where you take a clip hole cutter, so you have a clip hole and you take it out of your shape. And that's how I work. But Blender's powerful enough, you can do it either way, and both ways are valid. Blender's an incredibly powerful software. But if you look at the screen that's actually over that way, down there, there we are, down there. See, look at all that. There's loads of stuff. It's really busy. There's a massive UI. There's loads to learn. And any 3D CAD software is going to have a learning curve, but Blender probably has one of the larger ones. On the plus point, it is free. On the other point, I've actually bought a lot of add-ons. Some of them are free, some of them aren't expensive, and I have really recommend 2 or 3 of them that I use a lot. But Blender is how I think. I manipulate vertices, edges, faces. I like the way that works, far more than I ever liked Fusion 360. But it's not as good at engineering. I do snap everything to vertices, I line things up, I do things very exactly in squares at 76.2 millimeters. Very much everything still fits and works, but it isn't the same. And you might want to put add-ons on to get it more accurate, or you may just have to learn that every time I extrude something, or if I move something, I move it in 76.2x. I always put the axis on that I'm moving it in, so I'm moving it in the correct direction so it stays in the right lineup. And 76.2 just happens to be 3 inches in millimeters, and I work in millimeters. Frustratingly, it is in inches for tabletop gaming. It's just everybody seems to still use inches. I think it's because it's the American market's biggest. So tabletop games have always been in inches. It's just frustrating because 25.4 times table is not what I did as a child. Shergel says the one with the big ring full of fish. I don't remember that one. Auto carrot. Ah, yeah, Norm, the trouble with saying auto is I would never call that an auto. That's a car. Auto is something that automatically happens. You might have an automatic car, I suppose, without a gear lever, gear stick. But, yeah. Right, Doug. Tamsin tight, auto carrot, not auto correct. But you auto corrected it when you read it. Did I really? Oh, well, that just shows you how good I am at auto carroting. It also shows that I probably should have made this. Hang on, let me make it a bit bigger. Command plus. No. I'm on this one. Yeah, if I select it and make it bigger, I often make the I often make this a lot bigger, so my varifocals are always just not quite in focus. There we go. And now I can't see how many viewers there are. Right, there we go. So the argument for booleans in Blender is easily falsified. I think John had it right. It comes down to personal choice. I love my booleans. I boolean to death. I'm not changing the way I think. For me, it is much, much easier when I'm putting in a series of boolean clip holes to do it that way than to individually go in and do each one. But you know, it's up to you what you do. The end result is still an STL with a clip hole. It's just quicker for me to do it that way. Doug Jeffrey says that's true. Tim Williams says negate your choice. Shogo says getting rid of the ceiling is a choice of none of the above. Logical humour. How have you, Vulcan? So Monique, let's go back to this. Out of the puns. I use AutoCAD. Blender was very hard to try to learn. It was. It really was. But I do it full time every day, so I'm probably on ahead of the curve there. But I still find new stuff all the time. Every time I want to do something new, I have to go and Google it. Every time I update a version, I have to go and Google where everything that I used to do has gone to, especially going to 4.4, 4.3. I think I'm on 4.4 now. And stuff disappeared. Half my extensions disappeared and I had to go and find them again and re-bring them in. So, yeah, it is hard. I remember John, who I think is around, said he struggled and then he came back to it a couple of years later and it seemed much easier. So I think sometimes it is just practice. And actually, I've said find a 3D software that suits you. But realistically, even if you find one that suits you, you're not going to get good unless you practice. 3D design is a big hole you will go down, but you won't come out the other side without practice. No matter which software you pick, they all have a learning curve and you will all need to practice to get better, or you'll just forget it. I can't remember it if I don't do things. You know, if I want to remember the names of all the obscure characters in Star Wars, I have to go and Google them every time to remember them. It's the same with Blender. You know, things don't stick in my brain like they used to. Norm just said automobile. Timber says agreed, Monsville. Monsville, so Monique says vehicle. Yeah. And then Rocket Tim is they are automatically mobile. Okay. Sugar is punning again. I know, Doug. He's just got so many good puns. It's unreal. Sugar says, because John is in the Swedish time zone lately, he might have missed the live stream. He might have missed the live stream. He doesn't come on this one ever. But he was on his on Friday. So there we go. So whichever one you pick, you know, watch some videos, practice it. Start simple. If it's in Blender, the donut course is by Blender Guru is practically a rite of passage. Spell RITE if we're going to be doing how people spell things wrong. A rite of passage to get there. So, you know, but without this software, 3D design is kind of negated a bit. So then, actually, before you start getting too far design-wise, you need to understand printer limits. Now, if you're already printing, you will have some things that you understand already because you've sliced. And if you're not printing already, it's quite hard to design if you don't actually understand what you're designing for. And I find there's two sets of creators out there. There's the set of creators that design great creations. They look amazing and they may be for games, so they're not printable. They may be that they never print them, so they don't worry about how easy they are to print because the design is everything to them. It doesn't matter if it's printable as long as it looks good. Problem with that is they don't print. If you were to go on Thingiverse back in the day, you could pick up something and it wouldn't print. It literally wouldn't print. And you'd have to sort it through Netfab, or I use formware.co now because Netfab doesn't really exist for Macs. You know, there's always been a way to fix them, but it's amazing how hard it is for people to understand some of the basics. This is the bottom of my model. This is the first layer, this purple layer at the bottom. These squares have got 2 outside lines on them because I want them to be robust. It's part of the main system. And I do have a nice flat base. My first Kickstarter, Tamsin was a print tester and was brilliant. And I had a lot of problems with, I had them all level, I tested them all, but I was printing at 0.2 or 0.16. And then one of my other print testers would go and print at 0.1 and say, well, your bottom's not level. I'd be like, it's level for me. And the difference of 0.1 was quite noticeable. Now I will, if I'm doing something that is potentially bumpy, I'll shove a ground plane cube on there and cut the bottom with a boolean to make sure it's flat. But you always need to understand how well you'll print. So if you're going to design for resin, it's a very different set of tolerances to if you're designing for FDM. If you want to design for resin, you have to know how to support stuff. If you want to design for FDM, you really want to print without supports as much as possible because supports mar the surface. Having said that, nothing is as bad as having white metal giant nubs on the side of it, as I discovered recently. A 0.4 nozzle is your standard nozzle. So lines are going to be 0.4. The printer will go a little bit smaller, but it's not really going to go down to 0.2. It might go a little bit fatter, but it's not going to go up to 0.8. By the time you get to 0.8, it's going to be laying 2 lines down. You can do Arachne and it will do, it's a slicer choice. You can have a classic engine or the Arachne engine, and the Arachne engine will go slightly finer. So you can get finer details. And it's worth playing around if you haven't played with those 2 slices and seeing options and seeing the difference. So apart from always having to have a flat bottom when you're designing, overhangs. If you look at this cube that's on here, it's a crate. These sort of bits on the side, which look like crosses, they are the potential for an overhang. Across the top, there's actually a line the same depth out. Now the X's are fine because they're going up in a step sort of diagonal. So each layer is slightly over the next one. So they'll print fine. The top though is flat. And if you were to try and print this flat and you've got your back here, and you print this flat, if it's more than about 0.2 or 3, your printer is probably going to end up doing a whole new line on the outside, a 0.4 line. And there's nothing to support it. It's just going to fall down. And you'll get floppy bottoms to your overhangs. If you were to look at this crate, which is just thrown up there at the angle that really doesn't help, you would see that actually my crate, instead of being like this, let me see if I can do it. So instead of having the wall of the crate and then the overhang like this, the overhang's at this angle. So effectively, the crate does that. It has an up, a 45 or higher, and then the next up. All of my overhangs have a 45 on them, at least, preferably a 50 or more. But they all have a 45, so there's a chance of it printing. If I'm worried, I orientate. So this crate is designed to print in a certain orientation. Orientation, I always put stuff down. You need to make sure you can tidy up overhangs, but the amount of stuff I see where people just shove a 0.5 centimetre overhang and expect it to print. I'm spraying something today and I was looking at it thinking I didn't tidy that overhang up a lot. Why? Because this overhang was 0.5 centimetre and I'm printing at 0.08 and it doesn't bridge, it doesn't overhang well. And it's literally in midair. It's on an outside corner. There's nothing that's going to hold it apart from a support. But supports get messy. And if it's inside something, there's nothing for it to support on except another piece of your print, which makes that bottom messy as well. And you can mud with your support settings, and people get them so good they practically just fall off. You can do them in a different thing. So you could do them in Petga, because PLA doesn't stick to Petga, and it will come off more neatly. There's all sorts of ways around it. You can also design it so that you don't have that problem. Right, so back to chat for a sec. Monique says she's in Australia. It's 6:11 a.m. Monday. Wow, Monique, you are up early. So Doug says, welcome to the past, Monique. Monique's response is, I'm one of the tomorrow people. Yay, tomorrow people. 1970s were so cool. Yeah, I have just left the 1970s in my rewatch of Doctor Who. We started in 1963 and I'm currently in 1980. In fact, we're on the Keepers of Traken, which is the one where Nyssa joins the team, if you remember that. Adric came up with Full Circle, which was one of my favourite books from Doctor Who. I've read them all as books, and I remember them better as books sometimes. Shergel says, some people are afraid of new wall models, arachnophobia. Indeed. Luckily, there are loads of good resources on the web. There are, and actually all of this you will find on the web. Graham says, hi Graham, I'll need to watch from the start to understand what you're talking about. I'm talking about 3D print design. So we've briefly got it out of order, and I've just done best 3D print software, software is whatever works for you. And then we're now talking about the most important thing is to understand your limits. You can do, so say I was doing a walkway, or this is a ruler, okay? This is a ruler that John designed for my racing game that Doug and John did great work, thank you John, on getting out. It was just sat there and sat there and sat there, and now it's out. They actually stepped in at the last minute to do it for me. That's 2mm, or maybe 3mm actually thick, so it's nice and robust. If this was 1mm, it would flex. So you need to understand, if you want to make a walkway that's this long, you can't make it out of 1mm thick. It's just going to flex too much. You can actually go to a single layer and use that in a print, but it's not going to be very robust. So even if you're doing something like a sign and you want it to be see-through, you might want to go to 2 layers. So it's all about understanding exactly what it is you're modelling and how fine you want it to go. If you are going to model this, print orientation is vital. You will not put it to print like this. It could print with a big solid base on it and brimming, and it would print, but it would be wobbling like mad by the time you got to the top here, and it would be a really bad print. If you put it flat and print it this way, it'll print perfectly. And yes, you might have a little bit on the top that isn't as smooth, but it's great. If you want to do a base for a mini, and I mean just a mini base, and it's this way down and it's got loads of rocks on top, if you're doing a 0.08 layer height, it will look quite good, but the top layer, when you look down, you'll see the stepping. You see it on my mud terrain tiles. You can see the stepping on slopes. So if you've got curves, any curve in a 3D print, and it's at the top, you'll see the stepping. If it's on the side of a print, it will do it so much better because it's got less rate of change perhaps. You get better details on a side than you do on a top of a print. So it's really important to think very much about print orientation, print thickness, strength. There's no inherent strength to 3D print. I can't make a shelf out of a 3D print. It will just bend. I looked at it when I was doing Skirt City, and apart from the price, it will just bend. If you have a bit like this and you put a weight on this end, 3D print will go down. If you have a plywood sheet like this and you put a weight on this end, plywood sheet will just maybe flex a bit, but it won't go down. Shergel, the chamfer can help hide elephant foot problems. A lot of problems high up on the print are actually traced back to the first layer issues that are not noticed. That is true, and I have to say, since I moved to a bamboo that does a lot better levelling, and my Prussel was always great at levelling, my Elegoo's used to drift off regularly. Not the Pros, but the Plus, which has got screws. The screws would loosen and they drift off regularly. And so I'd go from being not quite right to too thin. And it was really frustrating. So it's important. I don't actually get elephant foot at the moment on my current prints. Maybe it's a bamboo thing. Maybe it's a compensated thing in the slicer. So Shergel says, and some people have supports only on the print bed, so there's no internal ones. That's true, but some things are designed so that you need a support on the inside, just because that's how they're designed. Tamsin Adric is Tom Baker, not Colin Baker. We're still in 1980s. I think Colin Baker's 90s, isn't he? He's 1980 anyway. We've still got Peter Davison to go first. Adric, I remember, he's the one that has a gold star. Full Circles are really cool episodes. So Doug says, there can be issues caused by printing supports in a different material. Okay, if you have a tool changer, swap printing heads, but problematic for a filament changing print head. That's an interesting one, Doug, because of course I have a filament changing print head, and I actually just don't do supports ever really. Shergel, the Keeper of Traken when Nyssa joins is one of the great episodes with the Master. I'd actually say almost every Doctor Who episode with the Master is a great episode. He is a really good class there. Oh, and Shergel says it's a Tom Baker / Adric episode. And Monique has to go. Kathy and team, have a great week. Thanks, Monique. Have fun. Enjoy your week. Monday already. Tamsin just checked. Adric was earlier than I thought. Tom Baker and Peter Davison. Did he go to Peter Davison? Oh, yes. I remember his death. Yes, I remember it. It's very sad. I just gave it away if you haven't watched it. Oops, sorry. Anyway, Colin Baker was 1984 to 1986. Yeah, I'm in 1980. Now I remember 6 and 7 only had female companions. I remember Ace was Sylvester McCoy. I don't remember who else he had. Oh, and that means if we've got Nyssa, we're getting Perry soon. And all Perry did was scream. Oh, I get really annoyed with women and all they can do is scream every time something goes wrong. Oh, woman, just conk him over the head. Stop screaming. Yeah, I have a very 21st century view of 20th century screaming heroines. So once we've understood our printer limits, and actually one of the important things is if I wanted to print, say, this gun, it's nigh on impossible to print that in FDM well, because of the size that it is and the fact there's no easy orientation to print it in. And minis generally are better in resin in my view. So people are now using 0.2 nozzles in the A1 Mini from Bamboo and getting reasonable results. But at 0.08 layer height, I did a test print or 5 and I think one of these is 0.16 and 0.08. Anyway, I've been doing test prints with these, and at 0.08, if you were to look at this, you can hardly even see the layers. And I find that all the time now with my prints. Even at this is a 2 mil, I think, a 0.2. If I can catch the light right, you can hardly see the layers on that, though there are layers. I printed this because I was interested in the snap lock for putting, I guess, yeah, I have a plan for a snap lock. All will become clear. Yeah. There we go. Oh, we're back on Doctor Who. Giving away plot points from an episode when I was at school still seems like an expired spoiler warning. I know. I'm like, I shouldn't say it. I shouldn't say it. You might all go and watch it now. And it's like, yeah, it was actually when I was at school I went to senior school in 1984. So yeah. Sylvester had Colin's Melanie as his first companion before Ace. I had forgotten that. Thank you, Stephen. Yes. And then Rocket City Tim, there were Doctor Who episodes that weren't Tom Baker. Yeah, we started in 1963 and we've got to 1980. We have watched 27 years already. It's all on the BBC iPlayer for free if you're in the UK. And you can start in 1963. Some of them are animated. In fact, one of the ones from Doctor Who Tom Baker that I don't remember, Sharda, that was had animated sections as if they'd lost parts of it. It would like in film, inanimated. But if you go back to the William Hartnell, some are just totally missing. A lot of them they're filling in as animated now. So, yeah, Shergel says you'd miss out on so many Pertwee unit episodes with that thinking. Oh, the Web of Fear. I love that one. It's one of my favourites. Rocket City Sim for 06 are using a 0.4 nozzle. 0.08. I am using 0.4 because I'm doing terrain. Doug says, I bought a 0.25 nozzle for minis. Haven't tried using it yet. Oh, I look forward to seeing what that comes out like, Doug, because I know you'll post it. Tamsin says 17 years, not 27. 80 minus 63. Yeah, okay. I'm only an accountant. Don't get too excited by the maths. So Tim Williams says, Sharda was the lost episode. It was affected by a production strike and never finished at the time. Oh, right. And not broadcast. That might be why I'd never any idea what it was. Anyway, it's on iPlayer if you want to go and watch it. And it's not that much that was missing. Shergel says, I use 0.2 nozzle, 0.08 layer height for 15mm scale. I get better mini results from resin. Yeah, my problem with 0.08 is bridging. I'm not sure I've got any here. Oh yeah, these are the open lock stuff that John sent me. And what I find, I printed these in 0.2 probably because that's what the standard is. What I find is if I print a clip height this way, no problem. If I print it this way, in 0.08, I do get some sagging, even on that distance, which isn't that big. It will bridge it, it just doesn't bridge it well. So bridging is actually the other thing I should mention. So we've talked about overhangs, and an overhang hangs over the edge of your wall and is printing in midair. But sometimes you have two pieces with something between them. Yeah, and that bit going across the top of the two is a bridge. You can't bridge forever. You just can't bridge 20 centimetres. And I've looked at a lot of people's boxes that they do for like terrain, and they have massive doors. And actually Second Dynasty has this. They have doors all the way across. And if I'm doing 0.08 to try and get rid of my layer lines, and Ben doesn't design for 0.08, so this is me choosing to do it at half the height that perhaps other people do, 0.16. I find it doesn't put out enough plastic to get all the way across easily, and often, especially as the nozzle starts to get worn, it just halfway across and peters out and looks like a mess. And I can't bridge the top in 0.08 easily of, say, a door. So when I'm designing, I never design the door top as an integral part. I always design it as a separate part that you put on afterwards. And I think it's quite an interesting point where you have to know how long you can bridge. And it isn't just a factor of your door size, it's also a factor of your filament, your layer height, the length, and your printer, the slicer even, and what filament settings you have and what flow you have. All of these things can affect how far you can bridge. So it does make it a very, a thing you need to test, I think, how far you can bridge on your printer. Doug says, I've had it for 3 months so far. That's his 0.25 nozzle, so don't hold your breath. I don't think I've got a 0.2 either. Rocket City Tim, be sure to use a very high quality, high speed PLA for the 0.25 nozzle, otherwise it'll be the clog of the hour club. Ooh, I just use bamboo now on my bamboo printer. It's relatively cheap. I can get it within 2 days and it's really cool. You need more cooling to make that bridge with 0.2. Yeah, see, this is the thing. I was looking at something and they'd bridged, actually. It looked like it was that sort of distance. And I was like, that's an interesting design. And he showed on, here's a print of it. And I could see there was a slight sag, but not as much as I'd have had on any of my printers, to be honest. So Doug says he almost exclusively prints in Petga. I've bought a roll, but never done it. But Rocket City Tim says, same principle, if it doesn't melt very smoothly, it will clog. Right. Sugar says it has to be stiff enough and fast enough not to sag, but not so stiff or so fast to break. And I think 0.08 is not a great bridging layer. So what I do, it struggles to even do the bottom of open lock tiles neatly. But the other thing to think about is, certainly when you're doing it for yourself, if you've got something like a grid forged tile, so let me just pick this one up. It's got a bit of bridging across. Yeah, I've got a grey one. That might show better. Yeah, okay, a grey one. So if you look, it's got bridging across here, and this bit here is at a slope. And that bit there does not print well at 0.08. But what you can do, I've actually got it on thick bridges and 85%, which is a layer thing that John said to me to try. John from Second Dynasty. But what you can do is do variable layer heights up to here and make it 0.2 up for the tile, and then the bit above, which is the visible bit, do that at 0.08, which has the plus point of making it print faster. So it's really easy to do some of these things afterwards in the slicer to make things better to print. Right. Shirgle says, yeah, it's not great, but at least it's not heavy. Thick bridges does make stiffer, all part of that equation. Yeah, I've just got it on as default for the 08 for any bridging. So you have to know your printer limits. And if you're designing for resin, it'll be a completely different set of size limits. You can make smaller details. You can put textures in there that just won't resolve in FDM printing. But FDMs are getting better and better. So I think they're catching resin up a lot, not for minis, but the smell is far less. So it does make it worth it. And once you've got that, we then get into the 3 that I did. And we're on to make sure it actually prints. So this is almost a continuation of what we've been talking about. One of the biggest problems people have when they're 3D printing is, say they want to learn Blender. There's not many how to 3D print with Blender videos out there when I started learning it, maybe more now. So you go along and you get this wonderful video on how to use Blender, and at the end it's for a render and they say, here's your wonderful render, and you look at it and you take it and it doesn't print because it's not manifold, because they put a plane in somewhere. Or you get a game asset because you want to print a Tomb Raider, and you get this game asset and it's low poly, and you smooth it out and you eventually get it quite smooth looking, because you can do that in Blender just by adding a sort of subdivision onto it. Looks all right, doesn't print the hair all over the place because it's just layers of planes, which is all you need for a game. So you have to understand what makes something manifold. This is a dice. We're going to use it because it's a cube. This is a cube with bits and what's it's on. Okay, this cube, if it wants to print, it needs every single outside edge to be there and no holes. If this 4 was on there and it wasn't filled in, if that was just a hole, the 3D printer wouldn't know what to do with that. It'd be a hole. They'd look at it and go, oh, what do I do? Obviously, they don't make vocal noises, but they wouldn't print it. Some of them would just guess and print it, and you'll see that printers will say 24 errors and you can still print the file. On Presser Slicer, there's a red exclamation mark or a black exclamation mark, and the reds are worse and the blacks are better, but they're still bad. Obviously, they're exclamation marks. And I use Presser Slicer because I find it the easiest to spot that on, to check whether my stuff is going to print or not. If Presser Slicer doesn't bring a warning, I go, that's fine. If Presser Slicer brings up a warning, I'm like, oh, I need to go and fix it. Now, Blender does have some tools. I find Blender can sometimes make things worse. So I actually nowadays just dump it onto formware.co, notes that way, which is down here, which is a free online STL repair. Since they brought on a second server, the queues have gone back down again. At one point it got really slow. And normally the most I ever see on those is about 20 people in front of me in the queue. You queue it up, it goes through, it adds quite a lot of geometry in now. They've changed something and it adds more geometry in than it used to. It used to take geometry out more, but you'll find that your flat edges, if you've got a big square, it will now be full of loads of triangles. And it fixes it. It joins it all into one mesh. So the kit bashers are going to hate you because they can no longer take out the one thing that was in there that was separate and find it in Blender, because you've now just got the exterior of the mesh, but it will always print. So my first thing I always do is just put it into press a slicer. If it's fine, I don't do anything. If it doesn't, I shove it on formware. I don't even bother checking on Blender now, I just shove it on formware. Even if it's only like 5 errors, it goes up on there. If for any reason formware can't do it, and the main reason if it's over a 50 meg file, which if it's a textured damaged building, it's a 3x3, it probably will be bigger, then I might need to go and fix it. Sometimes I'll dump it back into Blender. If there's not that many errors, I'll use the native Blender 3D print toolbox, which you have to enable, but you can click make manifold and it will make it manifold. It's just one of those things that you know, Blender can't cope if you have two overlapping vertices that are identical. So if you've snapped a vertex to another vertex, it can't cope with that when it does the STLs, and it will create non-manifold meshes that are really hard to fix. Formware will fix them no problem. It copes very well with that. Once it's over that size, I had problems with my junk piles from the last Kickstarter. Massive pile of junk made up of hundreds of different STLs piled up on top of each other. Loads of work at this point to get it there. Wasn't working. Formware too big. I'm not going to fix it. What do? I mean, it's a lot of work to go through and fix the 300 odd errors that are in there. And some of it is because it's got a cutter on it for the ground. So it's cutting two things in the same place. So Booleans create a lot of vertices in the same place. Because if you cut something that's lined up and it's two cubes that are sort of lined up in one place and you cut them both with a Boolean, it will put the vertex in the same place on both of them. You can do that by just, clip holes are some of the worst for that. You can do that by just cutting one out with a bigger clip hole and one with a smaller clip hole, and obviously the smaller clip hole's the size you want. And the bigger one just makes it a bit bigger. So you're not slicing in the same place, and that can get rid of it, so you could then re-export it. But these junk piles, I spent almost a week trying to get them manifold. And in the end, I discovered that the easiest way was to put them all into one big object. So I combined everything into one. So I applied every modifier I had, combined them all, and then I hit a remesh. Now, John was saying on Friday, don't do remesh. He hates remesh. Sometimes remesh is the answer. I put on a voxel remesh 0.1, bearing in mind I'm working in meters as millimeters, so 0.1 is actually quite small. So it's 0.001, I guess, if you're working in actual millimeters. So I put that on, and it blows out the amount of geometry, but it does make it more or less printable. And then I decimate it back down to 0.05 or something. And it will normally end up a little bit bigger. Sometimes if I do it at 0.1 decimate, it'll be a bit bigger. It really just depends. But it did it, and put it out there, and it was perfectly manifold. And this had taken me a week of playing on these junk piles, trying to get them manifold and sorting them. And I was pulling my hair out, and I really didn't have time to just muck around on trying to make some junk pile I created printable. You know, and I tried splitting it up and putting it in pieces onto formware. It was when I put it back together, it just didn't work. It was a nightmare. So I did the remesh. It took 5 minutes and fixed it. So that basically is my workflow. Do it in Blender, shove it into Process Slicer. If it says it's okay, fine, put it ready to print. If it doesn't, put it on formware. If it's too big, look at it quickly in Blender. If it's not an easy fix, remesh it, decimate it back down again, shove it back out. If it has errors, you know, they're easier to fix in Blender. They're probably one or two. Back in the old days, I would be fixing 300 ones using the 3D print toolbox in Blender. I don't have time to do that now, so I don't do it. Shergel says, we'll make it printable. It's our manifold destiny. Doug says, MMF warned that they can't guarantee printability for your training grounds freebie and ask that people upload a picture of it printed, even after they've already got a set of pictures. I think that just stays on there till they get round to going through and ticking it off. And I don't know, we had a debate about whether they could automate this from certain designers. I don't know if they don't print them. You know, all they'll do is run some check. But I loaded it up on a Thursday. Was it? I loaded it, maybe. So they probably just hit the weekend and haven't done it yet. Tim says there's a Cure extension called Mesh Tools that has a fixed model normals option that can fix watertight errors, alternative name for manifold. That said, most of my designs print okay without this. I think I get them because I use Booleans, and I know that. But sometimes if you just line all your meshes up by clicking vertices to make sure everything lines, you'll be automatically putting two vertices in the same place. And that's where Blender, when it does the STL, it's actually all manifold in Blender. All of these are manifold in Blender. They're not manifold when they come out. And it's because of those lineups. So if I had a cube that was like this and another cube that was like this, and they were clicked onto a vertex down here, that would be non-manifold when it came out, generally out of Blender. Not by a lot, but it would be non-manifold because it would put those two vertices as one vertex in the STL because there's two occupying the same space. So Rocket City Tim says, got to bug out. Thanks for all the chat and the insight. Great to have you, Tim. Have a great night. Shergel says, a lot of things end up using the NetFab mesh repair tools in the end, but slicers can often small inconsistencies can make it printable without all the fuss and bother. Sometimes, if it's just like 4 errors, I'll just export it from Process Slicer, which will have says I've fixed the 4 errors, and it will work, and I just load it back up and it's fine. So I'll often just try exporting it back out of Process Slicer again if it's only a couple of errors. But what I will say is NetFab is not available on the Mac. It's such an out-of-date version, it doesn't run on Macs. So if you have a Mac, you're not going to be using NetFab. And that's where formware.co will work just as well. Because the online upload free NetFab that was there from Autodesk got put behind their paywall. And I have Fusion 360 and I've never found their version on there works at all. So put it on formware.co and it will work fine if you've got a Mac. So Doug says you could merge vertices by distance and remove the duplicate. Yeah, but if I've got a cube this size and a cube that size, this edge that is in the same alignment and they're joined up and there's a straight edge between them, this one here doesn't have an edge to match this one here that comes in halfway. So then I've got to start creating geometry in this big one to match this one and then manually taking it out. I can just put it in firmware and it'll fix it. So I could do, and I do remove a lot of duplicates when I'm working, but if it's just a case of it has created that error when it does it, it's just quicker for me as doing this every day to just dump it somewhere else than worry about it. I noticed John spent all of Friday's live stream fixing Ben's prints, his mesh to be a much nicer mesh. His mesh will look a lot better than mine, probably when it outputs, because putting it into firmware does add a lot of extra geometry. But at the end of the day, when you put it from Blender, which is in quads, out to tris, which is STLs are a triangle format, it often creates weird errors and sometimes facets things that you just haven't noticed. So yeah, Shergel often fix. So there we go. So make sure it actually prints. What time are we on? 1/4 hour. And then this is a really important tip. This is one of the things. Once you've been designing a while, you'll have a load of stuff. So you need to reuse your assets. For this, because I use Booleans, for this I'm reusing a clip hole. So the picture here is me reusing this clip hole. This clip hole, I've got it in a file called clip holes, or I go to an old file and I open it up and I import my clip holes from previous files. I never redo a clip hole from scratch. It's always brought in from somewhere else. And this is the important thing. I don't want to be recreating stuff every time I need a clip hole. So I just bring in my clip holes. I can Boolean with it. Takes a second to sort this out. Reuse work. This is another example. I had a plant that I designed for this hydroponics tower. You remember the small one? I blew it up and I made it bigger for this one. And I also used it at a medium size in this one, which is the little medium 4 in a pot one. So I turn them and rotate them because it's a slightly random plant, so it looks slightly different. You can change it a little bit if you want. So you don't need to, within that, I've got 4 models actually, all reusing the same plant. Now, when it went bigger, it did look really square on the edges. So the 2 bigger plants, I had to round this edge off a bit. And that isn't going to show but you can see there's quite a thick edge on that. That's been rounded off a bit. It's got to be thick enough to print though, and that becomes the issue. But the first time I did it, you can see, if I was to put these side by side, that one is a lot thicker than that one. So I've slimmed it down a bit as I've been doing things. So I spent a bit of time sorting out that edge, making it a bit better, effectively. But reusing work, if you've done a computer terminal, you do not need to redesign a computer terminal every time you do one. Though to be fair, I generally redo my screens because it's quicker than trying to find one and get it at the right angle. Because a screen to me is an array of buttons and a square, and it takes 2 minutes to do. So I often don't, but a full-fledged computer terminal. A chair would be an example. So Second Dynasty tend to reuse the same chairs a lot of the time because they reuse their chairs. Why would you need to design a new chair every time you design a new spaceship? It's a standard chair. Chairs are fairly similar. I've got a bench seat that I reuse sometimes, which is like an outdoor bench, so you can reuse that. When I wanted to do these playable stairs, I knew I designed them 7 Kickstarters ago, so I went and found my one from there and reused the dimensions and then realised it wasn't going to fit, but it gave me the thought that I needed. When I want to do a grid forge base, I bring in the existing asset and just add it in. But the more and more you do, the bigger your library of existing things. If I want to do pipe work, technically I already have pipe work. Now, to make it different to my previous Kickstarters, I will redesign the pipe work again because I'm selling something new. But if you were doing it for you printing, you can just go and get your pipe work from the previous time you did it. You're not looking to sell something new, so it doesn't matter if it's the same. So you can go and get your existing pipe work and bring it in. An awful lot of speed is because you already have that crate. So I did design for these crates a set that I'd already previously designed, but because it was a bigger one and a different one, it was as quick to redesign it, I told myself, as it was to go and find the old ones. You can just reuse a lot, especially for floors. So my grid forge floors, I've got all the floors from my first Kickstarter, which were done on open lock, and my own attempt at a separate top system, which worked okay, but I still felt after a while the gravity gave out quite quickly. So if you have push fit, they start to wear, and the grid forge will over time, but it's a deeper fit, so it's slightly easier. So I think I can reuse all of those and just re-get those floor tiles and reuse them. So it makes things a lot quicker. I spent a lot of time working out the minimum mesh that I could print in a hex, so I don't want to go down that exploratory route again. So yeah, reuse your work. That is quite an important thing. And Shergel says, those plants are looking pretty succulent. They are, but they also printed, which was the important thing. So there we go. That was all about 3D printing. So whilst we're at it, I'm just going to put this to go in the background again, just to remind you all that with a few minutes left to go, that I am running a Kickstarter. Surprise, surprise. And it will be out on Tuesday. If you haven't signed up, then please go and do so. You can see a lot of my things I've been talking about at play here. One thing I really like is putting textures on walls of buildings. I feel it hides the layer lines. If you were to look at these, some of these have got just a quite thin paint job on. And I do feel it's quite, you don't see the layer lines in any of this, really. It's 0.08. It's printed in matte filament, which does actually sand a lot better than normal filament. I'm not really seeing layer lines at all when I look at this. And I'm really pleased with that. It, to me, just makes it, it's good. It's a good way of printing it. You do see it on the terrain tiles on the tops, but you know, terrain's easy enough to go over with a bit of a texture paint or something anyway. So I'm really happy how everything came out for this. You can clip or you can use gravity, and I think that's quite a powerful thing for me when I'm forever swapping it around, trying to move things back and forth. There's a few things that I might do some extras on. I did do a video on how to paint it if you missed that. And I did do a shorter video of what I've been talking about today. 7 minutes, it's how to 3D design like a pro or something. But I'm really, really kind of quite happy how this came out. But it's kind of done now, you know, it's waiting to go live. I think the Kickstarter market is slow at the moment. I think the biggest market is the US, and that has slowed a lot recently for various reasons, but mostly probably about costs and uncertainty. Those were Second Dynasty Power Loader mechs, by the way. And the orange ones, the figures that you see are 28mm. They're on the black side one, which is the very black featured one. They are 28mm from Print Minis, who do some really interesting stuff. I do like Print Minis. I've done a couple of their things for sort of when I was doing YouTube videos. There we go, those. And they do a nice set of crew. So they were their space station crew or something. And I used them in the hangar video I did. And then I've printed this in clear filament. Actually, Bamboo have now bought out clear filament. So I just use their settings and I've been printing using that. I did all this on my presser because some of the rolls, when I bought them, I didn't realise it was a test set, and then sort of, I'm holding it up and I'm not even on screen. They're on a like half size roll or a quarter size roll. So the rolls don't fit in the AMS system, which is really frustrating. It's been interesting doing 5 packs. I can't believe how many Kickstarters I've now done. It's really interesting. I need to do 4 this year to get it to really get a little bit more money coming in. So there we go. There's GridForge versus OpenLock. The advantage of GridForge, and the reason I'm going to use it for my next Kickstarter, if I want to pop one of the tiles out in the middle of this, I can just pop the tile out and change it. If I want to do that with OpenLock, I have to take the whole lot apart so I can get that one tile out. So it makes it inherently much more powerful, but it isn't as robust in that if you turn it upside down, it may or may not fall out. But anyway, it goes live Tuesday afternoon. So, yeah. Doug says, unless you turn the terrain tile sideways and print on edge. Yes, but Doug did quite a lot of testing at printing at different angles, and the view seemed to be they didn't fit as well afterwards into the GridForge bases. And I think that's an issue. John has designed these very tight on tolerances, not tight, but you know, there are 6 different base options and you pick the right one for your printer tolerance. And when I pop this in, I can turn this upside down. I've got it on a 3, which with a Bamboo generally works. It's all right for floor tiles and it will hold that one. But if I try it on this bigger one, it's just too heavy and it starts coming out. So definitely very much more a gravity upright system. but will hold your tiles, your floor tiles. I don't think it is going to hold walls that well, because walls are quite heavy and just, yeah. Shergel says, it is the dynamic changing of otherwise permanent terrain that is the huge draw of Grid Forge over OpenLock. Yep. And as Shergel just said in brackets, and they work great together too. Yep, you can get a, so the edge of this clips with supporty clips, which are quite small, much smaller than OpenLock, but you can get a supporty to OpenLock clip. So you could clip this into something that's got OpenLock on the side. You can also get nail clips, which go through from the inside out, so you can put it into a wall. And I'm going to use those on Scut City to attach some of my Grid Forge bases to the exterior walls once I've got them in place, because I need to put them in separately, I've decided, just from a getting everything in point of view. Yeah, so I like OpenLock for its firmness, and I don't think anyone's thinking of replacing holes and big chunky stuff from OpenLock. It works together really well with that though. And Doug did with the Trailblazer that I've printed as a fix center. He's actually put a Grid Forge base in there, and he can swap that out and put any interior that he wants from Second Dynasty or one of the others. So, and Doug says Ian of Dragon's Rest was a genius for inventing those nail clips. Yeah, he does great design work anyway. Dragon's Rest did Output, what was it called? Outpost, Origins Outpost, whatever it's called. The name's gone, it's too late. And he's got some really neat designs in there that we were looking at on Friday actually. I didn't print it in the end, Doug. I put some test prints on to go instead and then got derailed. Outpost Origins, yes. Just seemed like a weird name when I was saying it. But Dragon's Rest do some really nice stuff, and he came up with that clip, which is really useful if you're trying to put the Grid Forge into an existing spaceship or something with an OpenLock sort of, you know, without the space. You can't clip in two directions at once. So there we go. Yes, so we are at the end of the stream. I didn't put up the movie, which was in real time with me designing the crates. Don't worry, you didn't miss anything. And thank you all for coming. Have a great week. Don't forget the Kickstarter, and I will see you all in a month where we will be having some actual modelling. I've been painting, so there'll be some painting on there, the Trailblazer, and then there'll be some more on Scut City, plus the end of the Kickstarter. So I'll be talking about the next one at that point as I've been working on it. So guys, thanks for coming. Have a good one. See you next time. And I want the end stream button. Ha.